Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation History Story. Tonight we step into a night so cold it feels alive, the kind of cold that creeps through wool, wood and bone, as you stand on the edge of the American frontier with winter closing in. You can see your breath clouding the air even before the sun has fully dipped, and you already know that sleep tonight will not be about comfort. It'll be about endurance. Out here, tucked far from towns and paved roads, you probably will not survive this kind of winter without learning fast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening right now, cozy or not, post your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights. You pull your coat tighter and step toward the small cabin that will be your shelter. Winter on the frontier does not arrive gently. It asserts itself with sudden freezes, brutal winds, and a quiet that feels almost judgmental. Nights stretch longer than you remember, and darkness settles early, pressing against the thin wooden walls like a living thing. You're already thinking about sleep, because sleep here is not something you drift into accidentally. It is planned, prepared for, and sometimes feared. The first thing you notice is how early everyone starts talking about bedtime. Not because they are tired, but because nighttime is when the cold becomes most dangerous. Once the sun drops, temperatures can plunge dramatically. A mainstream historical fact often noted by scholars is that frontier winters during the mid-19th century, especially on the Great Plains, regularly dropped well below 0 Fahrenheit. There is no thermostat, no extra blanket hiding in a closet. There is only what you prepared before dusk. As you step inside the cabin, the smell hits you first. Wood smoke, damp wool, and something faintly animal. The walls are rough-hewn logs, their seams stuffed with mud and straw, in a technique known as chinking. You run your fingers along a crack and feel icy air seeping in anyway. This is normal. Everyone expects it. Historians still argue whether these cabins were ever truly warm, or if settlers simply adapted their expectations of comfort downward, far below anything we would accept today. You look around and realise how small the space is. One room, maybe two if the family's doing well. Beds are not neatly made with pillows and sheets. They are piles of layered necessity. Sleep will happen close to the fire, close to other bodies, close to whatever warmth can be captured and held. The idea of sleeping alone already feels a little ridiculous. Outside the wind rises and it makes a sound like something scratching to get in. You pause listening. Frontier diaries often describe winter winds as howling or screaming, but standing here you hear something more personal, like a low moan threading through the trees. It is the kind of sound that makes you grateful for walls, even thin ones. Night falls quickly now. The last light fades from the small window and the world beyond becomes an indistinct mass of shadow and snow. Oil lamps flicker to life, casting soft, unstable light that stretches shadows across the ceiling. You notice how carefully everyone moves. Oil is precious, firewood is precious, nothing is wasted, especially not heat. You're told gently but firmly that sleeping clothes are the same as daytime clothes. There will be no undressing down to comfort. That is a luxury left behind in warmer places. A quirky tidbit sometimes mentioned in personal letters is that some frontier families even kept their boots partially on while sleeping, loosened but ready in case they had to rush outside during the night for animals or emergencies. It sounds uncomfortable, but you're beginning to understand the logic. The fire is banked low. Instead of roaring flames, there is a bed of glowing coals carefully arranged to last until morning. This practice was common and necessary. Letting the fire die completely could mean waking to frost inside the cabin or worse. You crouch near the hearth and feel the uneven warmth on your face while your back remains cold. Sleep here is a negotiation between extremes. As bedding is laid out, you notice straw-filled mattresses called ticks. They rustle softly when moved and smell faintly of hay. Over them go quilts patchworked from scraps and sometimes animal hides. Buffalo robes, when available, are prized beyond measure. You run your hand over one and feel the dense oily fur that traps heat astonishingly well. Historians still debate how common buffalo robes actually were for average families, or whether their prevalence has been romanticized by later storytelling. Children are ushered closer to the warmest spots. Infants will sleep tucked between adults, their small bodies unable to retain heat on their own. This is not indulgence. It is survival. You sit down, carefully aware that every movement disturbs the fragile balance of warmth in the room. Outside, snow begins to fall. You cannot see it, but you can hear the faint tapping against the roof, soft at first, then steadier. Snow is both blessing and threat. It insulates muffled sound and blocks wind, but it can also trap you, cutting off access to supplies and neighbours for days or weeks. You think about morning already, about whether the door will open easily or need digging out. As the lamp is turned lower, the room darkens and conversation fades. There is no formal bedtime ritual, but there is a shared understanding that energy must be conserved. Sleep is not just rest, it is fuel. You lie down fully clothed, feeling the scratch of wool against your neck, the weight of quilts pressing you into stillness. Your breathing slows, sinking unconsciously with the others around you. The cabin creaks as the temperature drops further. You listen alert despite exhaustion. Every sound feels important. In the Wild West, winter sleep begins not with comfort but with vigilance, and you sense that tonight is only the beginning of learning how to rest, while the cold waits patiently just beyond the walls. You wake slightly in the night, or maybe you never fully slept at all, because rest here comes in shallow waves rather than deep plunges. The cold keeps you aware even under layers of wool and quilt, and as the hours creep forward, you become more familiar with the cabin that is holding you together against winter. When daylight finally begins to hint at itself long before the sun actually rises, you take a closer look at the place meant to protect your sleep. Cabins on the frontier are built fast, not pretty. Speed matters more than symmetry when winter threatens. Most families raise these structures themselves, or with the help of a few neighbours stacking logs cut from nearby timber. A well-known historical fact is that many frontier cabins were erected in a matter of days, sometimes even hours, especially when settlers arrived late in the season and risked being caught unprepared by the cold. You can feel that urgency in every uneven surface. You run your hand along the wall beside your sleeping place and feel the texture of dried mud and straw pushed between the logs. This chinking is meant to seal out wind, but it is never perfect. Cold air seeps through anyway, sliding along the floor like water. That is why beds are rarely placed directly against exterior walls. Instead, they cluster toward the centre, closer to the hearth, closer to one another. The ceiling is low. When you sit up, you almost brush it with your head. This is intentional. Lower ceilings trap heat, better keeping precious warmth from rising into useless space. There is a faint smell of sap and old smoke embedded in the wood, a scent that never quite leaves. Even in sleep, your senses stay alert, cataloguing these details because your comfort depends on them. You notice how few furnishings there are. A table, a couple of stools, maybe a chest for storage. There is no excess clutter to steal heat or space. Every object has earned its place. Beds, if they can be called that, are simple wooden frames or platforms. Some families sleep on trundle beds that slide under larger ones during the day. Others simply roll bedding out on the floor each night. The idea of a private bedroom feels almost absurd here. A quirky detail preserved in a few settlement records mentions that some cabins included a small loft, reached by ladder, often used by older children or guests. These lofts could be warmer due to rising heat, but also more dangerous as smoke collected there if the fire was not carefully managed. Historians still argue whether loft sleeping was a luxury or a risk, especially during long winter nights when ventilation was poor. You shift under your covers and listen to the cabin itself. Wood pops softly as it contracts in the cold. The roof creaks under the growing weight of snow. These sounds become part of your sleeping environment, as familiar as white noise in a modern city apartment. Silence here is never complete. The building breathes around you. Light enters the cabin reluctantly. Windows are small, sometimes little more than oiled paper stretched over a frame or a single pane of glass if the family's fortunate. Glass is expensive and fragile. In winter, windows are sometimes covered with hides or quilts at night to block drafts, plunging the interior into near total darkness once the lamp is extinguished. You understand now why people talk about winter nights feeling endless. The hearth dominates the room both physically and emotionally. It is built of stone or packed clay wide enough to hold heavy logs. During the day it's a place of cooking and work, but at night it becomes the heart of sleep strategy. Coals are carefully arranged to radiate warmth without flaring. A small iron poker rests nearby within reach even while lying down. You learn quickly that fire management does not stop when you go to bed. Outside, the wind shifts direction and the cabin responds with a new set of groans and sighs. You feel oddly reassured. These sounds mean the structure is flexing, not breaking. Settlers learn to read these noises, distinguishing harmless movement from signs of real danger. It is knowledge passed quietly without manuals or instructions. As the hours pass, you become aware of how the cabin shapes your body. You curl instinctively, conserving heat. You tuck your hands under your arms. Sleep here is a posture, not a state. Everyone in the room mirrors this, forming a collective shape of survival. There is no shame in needing warmth from walls, fire, or other people. You think about how different this feels from modern ideas of home. Comfort is not softness, it is function. The cabin does not promise rest. It offers protection barely enough, and that is considered success. Some historians suggest that frontier families recalibrated their expectations so thoroughly that they measured a good night not by how well they slept, but by whether they woke up able to continue. As dawn finally breaks pale and cold, you see frost glittering along the inside edges of the logs. It looks almost decorative, a thin lace of ice tracing the shape of the cabin. You know it will melt once the fire is stirred back to life, but for now, it is a reminder. This structure stands between you and a winter that does not care whether you sleep well. You settle back, conserving energy, understanding that tonight you will rely on these same walls again. You ease back into rest as the day fades again, and by now your body is learning the rhythm of frontier nights. Sleep begins long before you lie down in the quiet preparation of bedding that looks nothing like the smooth mattresses you might imagine. Here, what you sleep on is assembled from whatever can trap warmth and cushion tired bones, and every layer carries a story of necessity. You start with the mattress, if it can be called that. A tick, essentially, a large fabric sack, is stuffed with straw corn husks or dried grass. When you press down, it shifts and crackles softly, releasing a faint earthy smell. This is not accidental. Straw is cheap, abundant, and provides insulation as well as padding. A widely accepted historical fact is that straw ticks were the most common form of bedding on the American frontier throughout the 19th century, replaced only when families could afford feather filling or purchase mattresses much later. Over the tick come quilts. You notice the uneven stitching, the mismatched fabrics. These quilts are not decorative heirlooms, at least not yet. They are built from scraps of worn clothing, flour sacks, and traded cloth. Each square represents reuse, thrift, and quiet creativity. When you pull one over yourself, it carries the weight of many hands and many seasons. Quilting often happened during warmer months, a deliberate preparation for winter nights like this. Then there are the hides, buffalo robes, deerskin, sometimes even wolf or bear if a family is particularly lucky or skilled. You run your fingers through the fur and feel how dense it is, how it holds heat close to your body. A quirky tidbit found in a few trapping journals mentions that buffalo robes could weigh up to 20 pounds when dry more when damp, making them cumbersome, but incredibly effective against cold. You feel that weight now grounding and oddly reassuring, Underneath it all, sometimes directly against the floor, are extra layers meant to block rising cold. Old blankets spare clothing. Even newspapers, when available, are spread beneath the tick. Cold seeps upward relentlessly, and settlers quickly learn that insulation works both ways. You adjust these layers carefully, knowing that a thin spot could mean a long, uncomfortable night. Historians still argue whether frontier bedding was truly as uncomfortable as later accounts suggest, or whether constant physical labour made people less sensitive to hardness and unevenness. Lying here, you suspect the truth is somewhere in between. Your body aches, but it also yields finding pockets of rest where it can. You notice how bedding is shared, not just between spouses, but across generations. Children pile in together smaller bodies nestled into the warmest spaces. This is partly practical and partly cultural. In many 19th century households, the idea of individual beds for each child is simply unrealistic. Privacy is a concept deferred until survival feels secure. There is a sound to this bedding. Straw rustles, quilts whisper against wool sleeves, hides shift with a low, leathery sigh. These noises replace the hum of modern appliances. They become your nighttime soundtrack, soft and repetitive enough to lull you despite the cold. Smell is unavoidable. Bedding absorbs smoke from the hearth sweat from labour, the faint tang of animals processed and preserved. To you at first it is overwhelming, but as the night deepens, these smells blend into something familiar. They signal safety. They mean you are inside, not exposed to the open winter air. You pull the covers higher, feeling them brush your chin. There are no fitted sheets, no smooth cotton. Everything has texture. Everything reminds you of its purpose. Sleep here is tactile, a constant awareness of what touches your skin. You shift until you find a position where the weight of the layers feels evenly distributed, pressing warmth into you, rather than pinning you down. Outside, snow continues to fall. Inside, the fire settles into a steady glow. You listen to breathing around you, slow and uneven. Someone coughs softly, a reminder that winter sickness is always nearby. You tuck your head closer to the quilt, conserving heat, aware that these layers are your only barrier against frost. A few settlers wrote about dreaming more vividly in winter, perhaps due to fragmented sleep or the closeness of others. Historians debate whether these accounts reflect actual changes in sleep patterns or simply heightened memory during stressful seasons. As your thoughts drift, you feel images blur together, the day's labour mixing with the soft crackle of straw beneath you. Eventually your awareness dims. The bedding, imperfect and improvised, does its job. It holds you in a pocket of warmth just large enough to rest. You surrender to it, knowing that when you wake, these same layers will be shaken out, repaired and relied upon again. On the frontier, sleep is not something you escape into. It is something you build night after night with your own hands. By the time night settles again, you have learned one of the most counterintuitive rules of frontier winter sleep. You do not undress, not really. You loosen what must be loosened, unbutton what restricts breathing, but layers stay on. Shirts, trousers, socks, sometimes even outer garments remain in place as you prepare to lie down. Warmth once gained is not surrendered lightly. You shift your shoulders and feel the stiffness of wool that has been worn all day. It smells faintly of smoke and sweat, but it also holds heat better than almost anything else available. Period letters from frontier families make frequent mention of sleeping fully clothed during winter, not as an odd habit but as a matter of survival. Removing layers risks losing body heat that cannot easily be replaced during the night. You think about how strange this would feel at first. Clothing that rubs at the seams, buttons pressing into skin, sleeves twisted slightly from movement. Yet exhaustion smooths these irritations away. Your body prioritizes warmth over comfort. After a few nights, you stop noticing the discomfort altogether. Socks are especially important. Feet lose heat quickly, and cold feet can make rest impossible. Some families knit wool socks specifically for sleeping thicker than daytime wear. Others simply wore their regular ones until they were threadbare. An odd detail mentioned in a Midwestern homestead diary notes that children were sometimes sent to bed with extra socks pulled over their hands, turning them into makeshift mittens to keep fingers from numbing overnight. Outer clothing is negotiated carefully. Heavy coats are usually removed too bulky and restrictive, but vests often stay on. They trap warmth close to the chest and add another barrier against cold drafts. You tug yours tighter and feel how the layers create a cocoon around your core. Belts are loosened, boots are unlaced. Sometimes they are slipped off entirely, sometimes not. There is no single rule. What matters is readiness. Nighttime emergencies happen. A fire might need tending. An animal could panic. A storm could worsen. Being partially dressed allows you to move quickly without fumbling in the dark. Researchers remain divided on how often settlers actually slept with footwear on, but there is agreement that accessibility mattered more than comfort. You settle back against the bedding aware of how your clothing interacts with the layers beneath you. Wool against quilt, linen against hide. Everything overlaps, nothing is wasted. The idea of separate sleepwear feels almost laughable here. Clothing is not for fashion or even modesty. It is armour against cold. As you lie still, you notice how bodies around you are similarly wrapped. Children sleep in oversized garments passed down from older siblings' sleeves, rolled up hems tucked under. This is practical and economical. Growth is unpredictable. Winter is not. Clothes must serve multiple purposes, including nighttime insulation. The fire crackles softly. Someone stirs the coals with a poker, careful not to wake the room. You feel a brief wave of warmth wash over you, then fade as the fire settles again. Clothing becomes your steady defense, holding onto that heat long after the flame has dimmed. There is a psychological comfort in this too. Being dressed makes you feel prepared, less vulnerable. Night on the frontier carries uncertainties. Wolves howl in the distance. Wind rattles the door. Snow piles silently against the walls. Fully undressed sleep would leave you feeling exposed in more ways than one. Some observers of the period commented that frontier people seemed unusually tolerant of discomfort. Modern scholars suggest this may be misleading. Instead, they adapted quickly, redefining what discomfort meant. Cold that does not threaten life becomes background noise. Scratchy fabric becomes irrelevant. The body learns what matters. You roll slightly careful not to disturb others. The rustle of clothing blends with the soft sounds of bedding. No one complains. Everyone understands the trade-off being made. Warmth over ease, safety over softness. Your thoughts drift to how different this is from modern routines. Pyjamas chosen for softness. Temperature-controlled rooms. Here sleep is strategic. Every layer has a reason. Every choice reflects experience earned through hard nights. As fatigue deepens, your muscles relax despite the stiffness of clothing. Your breathing slows. The wool that felt heavy earlier now feels like a shield. You're wrapped not just in fabric, but in accumulated knowledge passed quietly from one winter to the next. Outside, the wind eases for a moment. Inside, the cabin holds steady. You remain dressed, prepared, warm enough. Sleep comes not because conditions are ideal, but because you have done everything possible to make them survivable. And on the frontier, that is enough. The fire is never truly asleep, even when you are. As night deepens, your awareness drifts in and out, and each time you surface, you find your eyes drawn to the hearth. Its glow is softer now, no longer throwing sharp light, just a low breathing warmth that pulses gently against the walls. This is intentional. Letting the fire roar through the night would burn precious wood too quickly and risk sparks, but letting it die completely could turn the cabin into an icebox by dawn. Before lying down, someone carefully tended the hearth, pulling glowing embers inward, stacking thicker logs just so, and banking the edges with ash. Frontier manuals and household guides from the 19th century describe this process in quiet detail, emphasizing that a properly banked fire could last 8 to 10 hours without attention. You can see the wisdom in that now. The fire is not just heat, it is insurance. You shift slightly and feel the warmth on one side of your body while the other side cools. This unevenness is part of the experience. Sleep becomes a slow rotation, tiny adjustments made half-consciously to keep blood flowing and fingers from stiffening. You tuck your hands closer to your chest sleeves pulled down over your wrists. The sound of the fire is subtle but constant. A soft crack, a faint hiss as resin burns away. Occasionally a log settles, sending a brief shower of sparks upward inside the hearth. You flinch instinctively, even though you know the stone and clay are doing their job. Fire is friend and threat, always demanding respect. An interesting note from early prairie settlements mentions that families often position their sleeping areas in a semicircle around the hearth, not only for warmth, but for safety. If a log shifted or embers spilled, someone would notice quickly. This communal awareness extended into sleep. Even resting people listened. You think about the effort behind every piece of firewood. Trees felled by hand, logs split with muscle and patience, wood hauled stacked dried. Burning it feels momentous. Every glowing coal represents hours of labour. No one sleeps lightly knowing how costly warmth is. As the night stretches on the fire slowly dims, shadows soften, losing their sharp edges. The cabin feels smaller, cozier, as if the darkness itself is pressing inward to help hold the heat. You breathe in and catch the scent of smoke, familiar and oddly comforting. It clings to everything hair-clothes bedding. Over time, frontier families came to associate that smell with safety, not irritation. Some historians point out that smoke inhalation was a constant issue in these cabins, especially during winter when ventilation was reduced. Others suggest that people adapted physically, developing a tolerance to smoky environments. The truth likely lies between those views. As you lie here, your throat feels dry, but you also feel sheltered. You stir again, and someone nearby shifts too. Perhaps they're checking the fire, perhaps just responding to the cold. No words are exchanged. Communication at this hour is minimal. Everyone understands the shared goal of making it through the night with enough warmth left to greet the morning. Outside, the temperature drops further. You can sense it even without stepping beyond the walls. The fire responds by shrinking its heat, becoming more precious as it fades. This is the most vulnerable part of the night, the hours before dawn, when cold peaks and exhaustion weighs heavy. You draw your bedding closer and angle your body slightly toward the hearth. There is an odd calm in watching the fire slowly burn itself down. Flames flicker briefly, then retreat. Embers glow, red, then dim to orange. Time feels suspended. Many settlers wrote about staring into the hearth late at night, finding comfort in its predictability. Even now your thoughts slow as you follow its rhythm. Occasionally someone rises quietly to tend the coals, a parent, an older child. The movement is practiced and careful. No one fully wakes. The poker scrapes softly. Ash shifts. A log is nudged into place. Then stillness returns. These small acts are woven into sleep itself. You realize that the hearth defines the room not just physically but emotionally. It anchors the family. It gives shape to the night. Without it, fear would creep in far more easily. With it, even a brutal winter feels manageable one night at a time. As the fire settles again, its warmth lingers just enough. You feel your muscles loosen, your breathing deepens. The glow fades to a faint pulse like a heartbeat in the center of the cabin. Wrapped in clothing and quilts, you let yourself drift, trusting that the embers will hold until morning, just as they have so many nights before. You become aware of how close everyone is as the night presses on. There is no personal bubble here, no polite distance. Bodies gather together because warmth multiplies when it is shared. You feel another shoulder against yours, a knee tucked close, the steady rise and fall of someone else's breathing brushing the edge of your awareness. This is not awkward. It is expected. Frontier households often slept several people to a bed, and sometimes several beds to a room. Census records and personal journals from the era show families of 6, 8, even 10 people living and sleeping in single-room cabins. Space is not arranged around privacy. It is arranged around survival. You sense how heat pools where bodies cluster, creating a fragile island of warmth in the cold room. You shift slightly and feel the mattress dip as others adjust with you. Movements are small and careful. Everyone learns to sleep lightly enough to respond, but deeply enough to rest. A gentle elbow or foot against you is not an intrusion. It is reassurance that you are not alone in the dark. Children are placed in the centre of these clusters, insulated by adults on all sides. Smaller bodies lose heat quickly, and families know this instinctively. An unusual observation recorded by a visiting school teacher in the 1870s noted that children on the frontier often slept more soundly in winter than in summer, likely because they were held so closely and consistently through the night. You listen to the overlapping breaths around you. They form a slow, uneven rhythm, rising and falling like a tide. This shared breathing becomes a kind of lullaby. Even when someone stirs, the group settles again quickly, warmth redistributing itself without discussion. There is trust in this closeness. You trust that others will not roll away and leave you exposed. You trust that if you wait cold, someone will make room. This mutual reliance shapes family bonds in ways that are hard to articulate. Modern scholars have debated whether such constant proximity strengthened emotional connections or simply reflected necessity. Lying here, you suspect it did both. Blankets and quilts are pulled up and adjusted communally. A hand reaches out in the dark, tugging fabric into place. No words are needed. Everyone understands the silent language of shared sleep. You feel a quilt brush your chin, then settle more securely around your shoulders. Heat builds slowly in the centre of the group. You notice the contrast between the warmth near your chest and the cooler air around your face. Breathing stays easy even as noses and cheeks grow cold. This balance is familiar to those who have spent winters like this. Too much warmth would mean sweat, and sweat means danger once the fire dies down. You think briefly about how strange this might sound to someone used to sleeping alone. Yet here solitude would feel unsettling. Cold exaggerates fear. Closeness dampens it. When the wind howls outside and the cabin creaks, you feel steadied by the physical presence of others. There is a faint smell of wood smoke and human warmth. It is not unpleasant. It is grounding. Over time, frontier families came to associate the scent with safety and rest. Even now, it signals that you are where you need to be. Occasionally, someone murmurs in their sleep. A half-formed word, a sigh. Dreams spill quietly into the room and fade. No one startles. These sounds are absorbed into the night part of the shared experience. You realize that sleep here is not a private retreat. It is communal endurance. Every person contributes heat awareness and reassurance. In return, everyone is carried through the coldest hours together. As your body relaxes further, you let yourself lean into the warmth beside you. Muscles loosen. Thoughts slow. The boundaries between you and others blur just enough to feel safe. Outside, winter continues its relentless work. Inside, bodies pressed close create a fragile but effective defense. You drift deeper now, supported on all sides. Shared breath, shared warmth, shared night. On the frontier, sleep is not something you do alone. It is something you survive together, one quiet, crowded night at a time. The night feels different when children are part of it. You sense their presence even before you see them. Smaller shapes tucked into the warmer spaces, their sleep lighter and deeper at the same time. Infants and toddlers change everything about how the night is managed, and you quickly understand that frontier families organize their sleep around the youngest members without hesitation. Babies are rarely placed in cribs during winter, even if a family owns one. Instead, they sleep pressed against an adult, often a mother, sometimes a grandmother, their tiny bodies wrapped in layers of cloth and shared heat. Letters written by frontier women describe waking repeatedly through the night to check a child's breathing, not out of anxiety alone, but because stillness in such cold could be dangerous. Warmth must be confirmed again and again. You feel how carefully children are positioned. Older siblings act as buffers, their bodies absorbing cold drafts that creep along the floor. A child's head is always kept higher, closer to rising warmth from the hearth. This arrangement is not taught formally. It is learned through observation passed from one winter to the next. An unusual practice mentioned in several immigrant memoirs describes parents warming stones near the fire, wrapping them in cloth, and placing them near a child's feet before sleep. The stones are checked frequently to ensure they are not too hot. This small improvised solution helps prevent chilblains and frost-numb toes, especially in cabins where the floor remains bitterly cold. Sleep is lighter for adults when children are nearby. You notice how mothers stir at the slightest movement, adjusting blankets, pulling a quilt higher, tucking a stray arm back into warmth. Night is not a time of full rest for them. It is a series of brief dozes stitched together by vigilance. There is no universal agreement among historians about how infant mortality shaped sleep habits on the frontier, but surviving accounts suggest that winter intensified both fear and attentiveness. Cold magnifies risk. Families respond by keeping children as close as possible, even when it means sacrificing their own comfort. You hear a child whimper softly in their sleep. Instantly, a hand reaches out, steady and practiced. No words are spoken. The child settles again, soothed by touch alone. This quiet responsiveness becomes part of the night's rhythm. As children grow older, their role in nighttime survival shifts. They're expected to stay still, to understand that movement can steal warmth from others. This expectation comes early. Frontier childhood matures quickly, shaped by necessity more than age. You notice that children often sleep longer than adults, their bodies demanding rest after days filled with chores. When they wake, it is often with confusion, unsure whether it is night or morning in the long darkness of winter. Lamps remain low to preserve oil, so time becomes indistinct. Stories are sometimes whispered before sleep, not for entertainment alone, but to calm young minds. Simple tales, familiar rhythms, a way to ease fear of wind animals and unseen dangers. These stories fade into breathing, then into silence. There are moments when illness intrudes. A feverish child radiates heat unnaturally, blankets pushed away despite the cold. This is when the night becomes tense. Adults remain alert, aware that sickness in winter can turn quickly. Observations from frontier doctors note that nighttime care often determines survival more than daytime treatment. You feel the weight of responsibility settle over the room. Children are not just sleepers. They are the reason sleep is structured the way it is. Their presence dictates closeness, warmth, and constant awareness. As the hours pass, you sense how deeply ingrained these habits are. No one complains, no one questions the arrangement. It is simply how winter nights are lived. Children sleep surrounded by warmth, breath, and quiet protection, their small lives held together through long, dark hours. Eventually their breathing deepens. Muscles relax. The room softens around them. You let your own awareness drift, comforted by the knowledge that this closeness is not accidental. It is deliberate care repeated night after night, ensuring that even in the harshest season, the youngest among you make it through to morning. As sleep settles back in, you become more aware of the sounds that never fully disappear. The cabin is quiet, but it is not sealed. Wind threads its way through every imperfect join, every narrow gap where logs meet, and chinking has dried and shrunk. You feel these drafts before you hear them, cool fingers brushing your ankles, your neck, the edge of your face. Cold air moves differently than warmth. It slides low, pooling along the floor, creeping under bedding and clothing. That is why sleeping positions matter so much. You instinctively pull your knees up, tucking your feet closer to your core. Settler journals often mention that the cold seemed to have a direction, as if it could hunt for exposed skin. It is an oddly accurate description. The wind finds its voice as it pushes through the walls. A soft whistle forms where a crack widens. A low hum vibrates through a log that has warped slightly over time. These sounds shift with every change in weather. By now you can almost tell how strong the wind is without stepping outside just by listening. You run your hand along the edge of the quilt and feel the subtle movement of air beneath it. Someone has tucked spare clothing along the base of the wall, stuffing it into gaps to block drafts. Old coats, sacks, even rolled up rags serve this purpose. There is no waste here. Everything that can slow the cold is pressed into service. A lesser-known detail recorded by a travelling surveyor describes families smearing animal fat into cracks during the coldest months. The grease stiffens in the cold, helping seal openings temporarily. It smells unpleasant, but it works. You catch a faint scent now and realise that what you're breathing is not just smoke and wool, but layers of improvised insulation. Despite all this effort, the wind still makes itself known. It rattles the door, gently testing the latch. You listen half awake, assessing whether the sound is normal or something to worry about. Night sharpens your senses. Every unfamiliar noise demands attention. There is disagreement among modern historians about how airtight these cabins really were. Some reconstructions suggest they were surprisingly effective when well built. Others argue that constant drafts were simply accepted as part of frontier life. Lying here, you feel that acceptance more than frustration. Fighting the wind would be exhausting. Adjusting to it is easier. The wind carries smells with it. Snow, distant animals. Sometimes the faint, sharp scent of pine. These sensory cues remind you that the world outside is very close, separated only by a few inches of wood and mud. Sleep does not erase that awareness. It coexists with it. You shift again, pulling the quilt higher over your shoulder. Someone nearby does the same, the movement rippling through the shared bedding. Heat redistributes. The cold recedes slightly. This constant micro-adjustment becomes second nature, a kind of unconscious teamwork. Occasionally a stronger gust forces its way through, and you feel it on your cheek. You turn your face inward, burying it closer to warmth. No one fully wakes. These intrusions are expected. They do not break sleep, only shape it. The cabin responds to the wind with a chorus of small sounds. Nails creak. Logs press against each other. The roof sighs under shifting pressure. You learn to read these noises, distinguishing harmless movement from something that might require attention. This awareness lingers even as you drift deeper. There is something oddly calming about the predictability of it. Wind comes, wind goes, the cabin holds, the night continues. Your body relaxes into this rhythm, no longer startled by every whisper of air. You realise that complete silence would feel unnatural here. The presence of wind confirms that the world is still turning, that the cold is being held at bay, not suddenly replaced by something worse. Noise becomes reassurance. As the hours stretch on, the wind slowly eases. Drafts soften. The cabin grows stiller. You feel warmth gather again in the centre of the room. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by others, you let the last awareness of moving air fade. Sleep deepens, shaped by sound and touch rather than comfort. Even through closed eyes, you sense the thinness of the walls, the persistence of winter just beyond them, and yet you rest. Because this is what frontier sleep is. Listening, adjusting, enduring and trusting that the cabin, imperfect as it is, will last until morning. When the storm finally settles in, sleep takes on a different quality. Snow has been falling steadily for hours now, and the outside world grows quieter with every passing moment. The wind softens, replaced by a thick, padded stillness that presses gently against the cabin walls. You feel it even before you consciously register it. The soundscape changes, the night deepens, snow transforms noise. It absorbs echoes, muffles distance, and wraps the landscape in a hush so complete it feels intentional. Many settlers wrote about how winter storms created a silence, unlike any other one that felt heavy rather than empty. Lying here, you understand exactly what they meant. Even your own breathing seems louder now. Inside the cabin, movement slows. The fire burns more evenly, no longer fighting gusts of air. Drafts lessen as snow packs itself into every crack and crevice, sealing gaps more effectively than any deliberate effort. You feel a subtle but noticeable difference in temperature. It is still cold, but steadier, more predictable. You listen closely and realise how few sounds remain. No insects, no rustling leaves. Even animals have gone quiet, hunkered down somewhere beyond your awareness. This silence sharpens your senses. You become aware of the smallest noises inside. Fabric shifting. A faint cough. The soft exhale of someone turning in their sleep. There is a note in a settler woman's journal describing winter storms as both terrifying and comforting. Terrifying because they could isolate families for days or weeks. Comforting because they locked danger outside. No unexpected visitors. No wandering animals, no sudden storms of dust or fire, just snow falling endlessly. You feel that isolation now. The knowledge that the cabin is cut off from the wider world settles in. Roads, if they can be called, that disappear under drifts. Landmarks vanish. Direction becomes meaningless. If something went wrong, help would not come quickly. This awareness hums quietly beneath your rest. At the same time, there is safety in knowing you will not be expected to go anywhere. Work pauses, travel stops, winter storms enforce rest in a way nothing else does. There is no debate about it. The storm decides. You sleep not because you choose to, but because there is nowhere else to be. Some historians caution against romanticizing this isolation, noting that prolonged confinement took a toll on mental health. Others point out that many families welcome the forced stillness as a break from relentless labour. As you lie here, you sense both truths coexisting. The quiet is soothing but also heavy. Snow continues to fall, layering the world outside in thickness you can only imagine. The roof bears the weight without complaint. Inside, the air feels softer, less sharp. You pull the quilt closer, feeling the steady warmth that has been slowly building all night. There is a faint, almost imperceptible sound as snow slides off the roof. It startles you for a moment, then fades. Your heart rate slows again. The storm asserts itself, gently reminding you that the cabin is not alone in the night. Dreams come more easily now. The silence invites them. Your thoughts drift untethered from immediate concerns. Images blur. The boundary between sleep and waking thins. Even the cold feels distant, managed. Around you, others sink deeper into rest. Breathing evens out. Movement stills. The room feels suspended, as if time itself has slowed to match the snowfall outside. You realize that this kind of night leaves a mark. It teaches patience. It enforces inward focus. It narrows the world to the size of a single room, and asks you to be content with that. As the storm carries on, you let yourself relax fully for the first time in hours. Snow has sealed the cracks. Silence has wrapped the cabin. Winter, for all its danger, has granted a pause. Held within this quiet, you drift into deeper sleep, knowing that morning will arrive eventually, but in no hurry at all. You notice the warmth shift again this time in a way that feels almost surprising. It does not come from the fire or from the people around you, but from a deeper, steadier source. Animals. On the coldest nights, the boundary between human and livestock shelter blurs, and you're reminded that survival on the frontier is rarely a solo effort. In some cabins, especially during severe cold snaps, animals are brought inside. Chickens might be tucked into crates near the hearth. A young calf or goat could be housed in a corner separated by a rough wooden barrier. Farm journals from the plains mention this practice, plainly noting that the body heat of animals could raise the temperature of a small cabin by several degrees. You feel that effect now, a low warmth radiating through the room. The smell changes first. A heavier earthy scent mingles with smoke and wool. It is not pleasant by modern standards, but it signals life and heat. You breathe shallowly at first, then adjust. The mind adapts quickly when the alternative is freezing. You hear the soft sounds of animals settling, a shift of hooves, a rustle of feathers, a quiet exhale. These noises weave into the night's rhythm, oddly soothing in their consistency. Animals sleep deeply, their bodies giving off steady warmth without complaint. An odd solution remembered in a Nebraska homestead memoir describes pigs being housed beneath raised cabin floors during winter. The animals' heat warmed the planks above, while the humans benefited from the insulation. The arrangement required constant cleaning and careful separation, but families who used it swore by its effectiveness. You sense how carefully this coexistence is managed. Animals are kept close enough to help, but far enough to avoid chaos. Everyone knows their place. Even in sleep there is awareness. A sudden movement or sound from the animals would wake the room instantly. There is no single agreement among historians about how common indoor livestock sleeping truly was. Accounts vary widely by region, wealth, and climate. Some families avoided it entirely, citing hygiene and safety. Others relied on it during the worst weather. Lying here, you understand why the choice existed at all. The warmth is undeniable. You feel it along your back, your legs. It fills in gaps that quilts and clothing cannot reach. This shared heat turns the cabin into a living system, each body contributing to the whole. You reflect briefly on how blurred the lines of domestic life become in winter. Animals are not just property. They're resources, companions, and sometimes co-sleepers. Survival demands flexibility, and rigid boundaries fall away when temperatures drop. Sleep deepens with this added warmth. The cold recedes to the edges of the room. You feel less need to curl tightly, your body relaxing into a more natural position. Breathing slows, muscles loosen. There is a quiet trust in this arrangement. Humans trust animals not to panic. Animals trust humans for shelter. This mutual dependence is rarely discussed in grand narratives of the frontier, but it plays out nightly in small cabins like this one. As hours pass, the animals remain still. Their warmth remains constant. You drift further into rest, comforted by the knowledge that life around you is working together to hold back the cold. When morning eventually comes, the animals will be returned to their proper places. The cabin will air out. The arrangement will seem temporary again. But for now, in the deepest part of the night, you accept this shared space without question. Here, sleep is not separate from survival. It is intertwined with every living thing under the roof. Wrapped in human and animal warmth, you let the night carry you onward, steady and secure until dawn. As night settles into its deeper stretch, you notice how the evening meal lingers in your body. It sits warm and heavy, a quiet companion beneath layers of clothing and quilts. On the frontier, what you eat before sleep matters almost as much as how you sleep. Food is fuel, and winter nights demand more of it. Supper is not light in cold weather. Stews thick with beans, salt pork, and root vegetables are common. Cornbread dense and filling appears often. Period household accounts describe winter meals designed to stick with you, to burn slowly through the night. You feel that now, the slow warmth spreading from your stomach outward, helping your body hold its temperature. Fat plays a central role. Rendered lard, bacon, grease and tallow find their way into nearly everything. These ingredients are valued not just for taste but for endurance. They provide long-lasting energy, something the body can draw on while resting. You can almost sense your metabolism working quietly, converting supper into heat. An unusual habit remembered in a Dakota Territory journal mentions families drinking a small cup of warm milk or broth just before bed on especially cold nights. This was not indulgence. It was a calculated effort to add warmth and calm the body before sleep. You imagine the comfort of that simple ritual, the steam rising briefly in the lamplight. Eating too little is risky. Cold burns calories relentlessly even at rest. Frontier families learned this through experience. Nights following sparse meals were longer, more restless, marked by shivering and frequent waking. There are accounts of settlers waking with numb fingers or aching joints after under-eating a lesson not easily forgotten. At the same time, overeating has its own discomforts. Heavy meals can make sleep uneasy, especially when lying fully clothed. The balance is learned over time. Enough to sustain warmth, not so much that rest becomes fitful. You settle deeper into the bedding and feel the quiet satisfaction of having eaten well. Your breathing steadies. Muscles relax more easily. Food becomes part of your insulation, an internal layer working alongside wool and quilt. There is some disagreement among researchers about how consistently frontier families could afford such hearty meals in winter. Crop failures lost livestock, and isolation often limited supplies. What is clear from surviving records is that when food was available, it was used strategically, especially before nightfall. Children are encouraged to eat even when tired. A sleepy child is gently nudged to finish a bowl, knowing that the calories will matter later. You recall the careful way supper was portioned, adults sometimes taking less to ensure the youngest had enough. As the night deepens, digestion brings a subtle drowsiness. Warmth builds from the inside out. The cold feels less sharp, less demanding. You adjust your position slightly, feeling the combined effect of food, shared heat, and layered bedding. The smell of supper still hangs faintly in the air, mingled with smoke. It is grounding, a reminder of routine and care. Even in isolation, meals anchor the day. They mark time when daylight is scarce. Sleep comes more easily now. Your body has what it needs, at least for the moment. Outside, winter continues its quiet work, but inside, nourishment does its own quiet work in return. You drift aware that tomorrow's labour will require the same preparation. Eat well. Rest when you can. Repeat. On the frontier, survival is built from these small practical choices made again and again as night closes in. The light never truly leaves you, even when the cabin grows dark. It lingers in memory in the soft echo of flame and shadow that follows you into rest. Oil lamps are turned low before sleep, not extinguished completely, unless oil is scarce. Their glow shapes the night, stretching shadows that move slowly across the walls as the flame breathes. You watch the light flicker, casting long, wavering forms that climb the logs and fade again. Every object becomes something else in this half-darkness. A coat hanging from a peg turns into a hunched figure. A chair leg stretches into something taller. Your mind registers these shapes, then dismisses them. This is familiar. Night on the frontier trains your imagination as much as your body. Lamps are simple things, often made of tin or brass with cotton wicks trimmed carefully to control smoke. Accounts from the period mention how much attention was paid to wick length, since a poorly adjusted lamp could fill the cabin with soot or go out unexpectedly. You smell the faint, oily tang in the air mixed with smoke from the hearth. Shadows shift as someone turns in their sleep. The movement ripples across the walls, slow and dreamlike. You find it oddly calming, a visual rhythm that matches your breathing. Light and dark take turns holding your attention, until neither demands much at all. An unusual recollection from a missionary journal describes children playing shadow games on the cabin walls before bed, making animals with their hands until fatigue won out. Even in winter, even in hardship, there is room for small, quiet amusement. You imagine the soft laughter fading into yawns, the lamp turned lower as sleep approaches. There is some uncertainty among historians about how long lamps were kept burning at night. Some accounts suggest they were extinguished quickly to conserve oil. Others describe a low flame maintained until morning as reassurance against darkness. The truth likely depended on supply and temperament. Tonight the lamp stays low, a small eye open in the dark. Light creates a sense of order. It defines edges. It reminds you where you are. In complete darkness, the cold feels sharper, the cabin less certain. With even a faint glow, the space feels manageable. You relax into that feeling, letting the shadows drift without meaning. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again, checking the room instinctively. Everything is as it should be. The fire glows, the lamp flickers, bodies rest nearby. This quiet survey becomes part of falling asleep, a habit shaped by nights when awareness mattered. The lamp sputters softly, then steadies. Oil burns slowly. Wick glows orange at the tip. You let your eyes linger until the light blurs edges, softening. Darkness seeps in gently, not all at once. As sleep deepens, shadows lose their hold on your thoughts. They become background like wind or creaking wood. The light fades further, either turned down by a careful hand or simply forgotten as exhaustion wins. You drift with the last movement of shadow, the final flicker of flame. Night wraps the cabin again, but not completely. Somewhere between light and dark, you settle into rest, carried by the quiet reassurance that even in winter the darkness is not absolute. Even in the heart of winter, the night never fully releases its grip on work. You feel it as a low awareness beneath your sleep, the knowledge that rest here is conditional. Chores do not politely wait for daylight. They press in whenever they must, and winter makes no exceptions. You drift in and out of sleep, and each time you surface, you listen. The cabin is quiet, but not inert. Somewhere nearby, a sound shifts the balance of the night. A log in the hearth settles too far. A door creaks under the weight of snow. An animal stirs in a way that suggests discomfort. These small disturbances are enough to pull someone upright. You hear it happen now. Fabric rustles. A body carefully disentangles itself from shared warmth. Boots are nudged closer, slipped on without lacing fully. No one sighs or complains. This is expected. Nighttime labour is part of the rhythm, especially when the cold is deep. Someone moves toward the hearth and gently adjusts the fire. The poker scrapes softly, barely audible. Ash is shifted. A log is turned to expose a glowing side. This small act will keep the room livable for hours. You feel the warmth change almost immediately, a subtle easing in your chest and fingers. Winter nights also mean checking animals. Even those kept outside must be accounted for. A cow can freeze in place if snow drifts too high around her legs. Chickens can suffocate if vents ice over. You picture a lantern bobbing briefly in the dark as someone steps outside, breath crystallizing in the air movements quick and efficient. People who lived this life often spoke of nighttime chores as more stressful than daytime ones. Darkness hides problems until they become urgent. A frozen latch, a blocked chimney, a panicked animal. These things announce themselves, suddenly demanding attention when your body wants rest. You lie still, listening for the return of footsteps. When they come quiet and careful, you relax again. The balance is restored. Everyone settles back into place, warmth redistributing itself automatically. Sometimes the chore is smaller. A pot of water left near the hearth to prevent freezing must be moved. A child's blanket has slipped and needs pulling back into place. A door latch is tested once more to be sure the wind has not worked it loose. These tasks blur into the night, half remembered in the morning. There is no resentment in this. Winter demands attentiveness, and those who survive it learn to accept interrupted sleep as part of the cost. Rest is taken in pieces stitched together between responsibilities. You think about how different this feels from modern nights, where sleep is treated as sacred and uninterrupted. Here, sleep is flexible. It bends around necessity. The body adapts, learning to fall asleep quickly and wake without confusion. Older children sometimes take part in these nighttime tasks. A boy might be sent to add wood to a fire. A girl might be asked to check on a younger sibling. These moments are quiet lessons, teaching responsibility without ceremony. Nighttime work becomes a rite of passage, marking the shift from being cared for to helping care for others. You sense the fatigue that settles deeper with each interruption, but also the competence that grows alongside it. People become skilled at functioning in low light, at moving without waking others, at solving problems while half asleep. This skill is rarely acknowledged, but it is essential. The cold sharpens consequences. A forgotten chore at night can mean frozen water by morning. A missed sound can mean loss. This awareness keeps everyone lightly alert even in rest. Sleep here is not an escape. It is a pause. As the hours stretch on, interruptions become less frequent. The fire holds steady, the wind calms, animals settle. The night grows quieter, allowing longer stretches of rest. You sink deeper now, trusting that the necessary tasks have been handled. Your body lets go, knowing that if something demands attention again, you will wake. Until then, you rest in fragments, piecing together enough sleep to carry you through the next day. On the frontier, winter nights teach a different relationship with rest. Sleep is not fragile, it is resilient. It breaks and reforms, shaped by duty, cold, and care. And as you drift again, you understand that this endurance, more than comfort, is what keeps life moving forward through the longer season. Night feels heavier when illness enters the room. You sense it before anyone speaks, a subtle tightening in the air, a change in how people move and breathe. Winter sickness does not announce itself politely. It arrives quietly, often after dark, when cold presses hardest and options are few. Someone coughs deeper than before. Another breath comes shallow and uneven. You listen more closely now, counting the pauses between sounds. In winter, a simple fever carries more weight. Cold weakens the body, drains strength, and turns minor ailments into serious threats. You feel that awareness ripple through the cabin, unspoken but shared. There is no doctor nearby. Towns are distant roads, unreliable. Care happens here with what is on hand. Someone sits up, laying a palm against a forehead, gauging heat by touch alone. A kettle is moved closer to the hearth water, warming slowly for a compress or a drink. These actions are practiced steady, shaped by long familiarity. Illness at night is especially frightening because darkness limits what you can see and do. Lamplight is turned up slightly, oil sacrificed without debate. Shadows retreat as the flame grows stronger. Faces come into view, lined with concern, eyes alert despite exhaustion. You feel the cabin shift from rest to watchfulness. Sleep loosens its hold on everyone. Even those not directly involved remain aware, ready to help if asked. Winter nights teach this kind of collective responsibility. No one truly sleeps when someone is unwell. Cold complicates everything. Fever and chills can mimic each other. Sweating is dangerous, but so is cooling too quickly. Blankets are adjusted, repeatedly added and removed in small increments. A damp cloth is placed then taken away. Every decision feels important. There are remedies known here, passed through families and communities. Warm teas made from dried herbs, poultices of mustard or onion, broths thickened with whatever protein is available. Some of these help, some do little. Still, they are offered with care and confidence because doing nothing feels worse. You remember hearing about families keeping small bottles of spirits not for drinking but for medicinal use. A sip to warm the chest, a rub along aching limbs. The smell is sharp and familiar, cutting through smoke and wool. It brings a brief sense of control. Children are watched most closely, their breathing is monitored, their skin checked. Adults take turns staying awake, resting in shifts. Night stretches longer when illness is present, each hour marked by quiet checks and whispered reassurances. There is uncertainty here that no one voices. Outcomes vary. Some nights end with recovery by morning, others do not. This knowledge sits heavily, shaping how gently people move, how carefully they speak. Hope and realism exist side by side. You notice how the fire is kept slightly stronger than usual. Extra warmth is needed now, not just for comfort, but for healing. Wood is added without hesitation. Tomorrow can be managed later. Tonight is what matters. The sick person drifts in and out of sleep, murmuring softly. Words make little sense. Dreams mix with waking. A hand is held, pressure steady and grounding. Touch becomes communication when words fail. As hours pass, signs are watched closely. A fever breaking, breathing easing, colour returning slowly. Or not. Each change is noted, weighed, responded to. Time feels elastic, stretching and contracting around each small development. Eventually exhaustion takes hold. Even vigilance has limits. Those watching rest briefly, eyes closing but ears tuned. Sleep comes in fragments, never fully surrendering. By the time dawn hints at itself pale and uncertain, the night has left its mark. Sometimes relief settles over the room. Sometimes worry lingers unresolved. Either way, everyone is changed slightly by the hours spent awake together. You feel the quiet afterward, the way the cabin exhales when crisis eases or simply pauses. Illness does not always resolve neatly, but morning brings options that night does not. Light allows clearer assessment. Movement becomes easier. As you settle again, you understand that winter sleep is never guaranteed. It is negotiated nightly, shaped by health as much as by cold. When sickness enters, the dark rest becomes secondary to care. And yet even then the rhythm continues. People adapt, support one another, and find moments of rest where they can. Sleep returns slowly, cautious but persistent. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet resolve, you drift again, knowing that if illness stirs once more, the night will answer just as it always does. As the nights repeat themselves, you begin to notice differences in how people prepare for sleep, shaped by memories carried from far away. Not every family on the frontier arrived with the same habits. Many brought nighttime customs from other countries, folded into this new landscape, and adjusted to survive its winters. You sense it in small things. A certain way blankets are layered, the order in which clothing is loosened, the words murmured just before eyes close. Families from Northern Europe tend to favour heavier coverings and closer clustering habits shaped by generations of cold weather living. Those from milder climates sometimes struggle at first, learning through trial and error how much warmth the night demands. Immigrants from Scandinavia, Germany and Eastern Europe often arrived with an ingrained understanding of insulation. They were used to sleeping under feather beds thick with down. On the frontier, feathers are scarce, but the concept remains. These families stuff ticks more densely, add extra layers beneath as well as above, and place greater emphasis on blocking drafts. You feel the care in how bedding is arranged, every layer deliberate. In contrast, families from southern regions sometimes rely more on proximity than padding. Bodies become the primary source of warmth. Sleep arrangements are tighter, more intertwined. You notice how these households adapt quickly, learning that closeness is not just emotional, but practical. An interesting habit remembered in a Swedish-American memoir describes placing a wooden board at the foot of the bed to reduce airflow. It seems simple, almost insignificant, yet it makes a measurable difference. These small adjustments, brought from older homes across the ocean, find new purpose here. Language itself carries into the night. Lullabies sung softly in unfamiliar tongues. Prayers whispered with accents that have not yet softened. These sounds shape sleep, creating continuity between past and present. You listen to syllables you do not fully understand, feeling their rhythm settle the room. There is no single way to sleep through winter, and people notice this. Neighbours compare habits quietly, borrowing what works and discarding what does not. Over time, traditions blend. A German-style quilt pattern appears in a cabin built by Irish hands. A Scandinavian draft-blocking trick is adopted by a family from England. The frontier becomes a meeting place, even in sleep. Some differences persist. Certain families insist on airing bedding briefly, even in winter, believing stale air invites illness. Others refuse, prioritizing heat above all else. These choices reflect deeply held beliefs shaped long before arrival. Evidence from settlement communities suggests that such differences sometimes caused quiet disagreements, though necessity usually overruled pride. You feel how these traditions affect your own rest. The way you are tucked in, the order of settling down, even the timing of sleep shifts slightly depending on whose household you share. There is comfort in routine even when it changes. Children absorb these habits effortlessly. They learn how to sleep as their parents did, then modify those lessons as the environment demands. Winter accelerates this process. There is no time for prolonged adjustment. What keeps you warm stays. As the night deepens, cultural distinctions soften. Cold is an equalizer. Wool feels the same regardless of origin. Fire warms everyone equally. Breath clouds in the same way. Differences remain, but they become quieter, folded into a shared struggle. You drift aware that this blending of traditions happens not just in daylight work, but in darkness too. Sleep becomes another space where cultures meet, adapt, and survive together. By morning, you may not consciously recall these variations, but they shape how rested you feel, how ready you are to face the day. On the frontier, winter nights are teachers. They test old habits, reward useful ones, and quietly reshape identity while you sleep. Wrapped in layers chosen by memory and necessity, you settle deeper, carried by a patchwork of traditions that stretch far beyond this cabin, reaching back across oceans and generations, holding you through the cold until dawn returns once more. As the night moves forward, you notice how some habits feel learned, rather than invented. They carry a quiet confidence, as if borrowed from people who have faced this cold far longer than any settler family. Without much discussion, certain practices have been absorbed, adapted and folded into nightly routine, especially when winter tightens its grip. You see it in how bedding is arranged closer to the ground, heat conserved rather than elevated. You feel it in the way doors are sealed with layered hides, not just cloth. You sense it in the calm acceptance of cold as something to work with rather than fight. These approaches did not originate in log cabins or immigrant farmsteads. They came from people who had lived with this land for generations. Settlers learned quickly by watching how snow was packed against walls to insulate rather than cleared away, how animal skins were positioned fur-side inward to trap warmth, how sleeping close to the earth could sometimes be warmer than lifting yourself above moving air. These lessons arrived quietly through observation and necessity rather than instruction. You feel the effect now. The cabin is colder near the ceiling, warmer closer to the floor. Bedding is thickest beneath you, not above. This runs counter to instincts shaped by different climates, yet it works. You stop questioning it once your body responds. An unusual but practical habit, sometimes remembered in frontier families, involved warming stones or bricks near the fire and placing them near sleeping areas, then removing them before dawn to prevent excess moisture. The idea was learned locally, refined over time, and treated as common sense by those who relied on it. You imagine the care required, the quiet checking in the dark. Clothing choices at night reflect this influence too. Layers are loose rather than tight, allowing warmth to circulate. Nothing is bound unnecessarily. Movement is expected even in sleep. You feel how easily you can shift without disturbing the careful balance of heat around you. The night feels less adversarial here. Cold is present, but no longer feels like an enemy. It is something anticipated, planned for, respected. That mindset eases your rest more than any single technique. Anxiety fades when you trust the system holding you. You listen to the wind outside and realize it no longer commands your full attention. The cabin arranged with these borrowed insights responds better now. Drafts soften, cold slows. The structure feels less fragile. Children benefit most from this knowledge. Their bedding is layered thoughtfully. Their sleeping places are chosen carefully. They are taught early how to curl inward, how to protect fingers and toes, how to conserve warmth instinctively. These lessons are not framed as instruction. They are learned through nightly repetition. Some settlers resisted these changes, at first holding tightly to familiar habits. Others adopted them eagerly. Over time, effectiveness settled the matter. What worked stayed. What did not quietly disappeared. You sense that this blending of knowledge is one of the frontier's quieter transformations. It does not appear in official records or bold stories, yet it shapes survival night after night. Sleep improves, fear recedes, confidence grows. As you lie there wrapped in layers arranged with this inherited wisdom, your body relaxes more fully than before. Breathing deepens, muscles soften. The night feels manageable, even predictable. Winter remains harsh. That has not changed. But you're no longer guessing how to meet it. You are participating in a long conversation between people and place carried forward through habit rather than words. Sleep comes more steadily now, supported by knowledge that predates this cabin, this family, even this moment. Held by techniques tested long before you arrived, you drift deeper, trusting that the night has been understood and that understanding will carry you safely until morning. As the room settles again, another layer of the night reveals itself quieter than chores, softer than wind. Before sleep fully claims everyone, there is a moment that feels set apart. It is unhurried, voices lower, movements slow. You sense a collective pause as if the day is being gently folded away. Someone clears their throat softly. Another shift closer. Words begin barely above a whisper. They are familiar words spoken so often they require little thought, yet they carry weight. This is the moment before sleep when hope is named, when fear is acknowledged without being dwelled on. Prayer takes many forms here. Sometimes it is formal learned long ago and repeated faithfully. Sometimes it is improvised, shaped by the day just lived. Thanks for surviving another one. Requests for warmth, for health, for the animals, for tomorrow. You do not need to believe the same way to feel the effect. The cadence alone is calming like a lullaby for adults. You notice how children respond. They quiet almost immediately, bodies stilling as voices settle into rhythm. Even those too young to understand the words sense the shift. Night has begun, in earnest. The world is being handed over to something larger than effort and planning. Hands are folded, eyes close. Sometimes the prayer is spoken by one person. Sometimes several voices overlap, each murmuring their own version. There is no insistence on uniformity. What matters is the act itself, the shared acknowledgement that some things are beyond control. This practice does not eliminate fear. It contains it. Worry about storms, illness, and scarcity does not vanish, but it is set aside for the night. There is relief in that. You feel your shoulders drop slightly as the words continue, the tone steady and unhurried. Not every family prays the same way. Some use scripture, some use memory, some simply sit in silence for a moment, heads bowed, breathing together. Even silence becomes intentional here, a way of marking the transition from doing to resting. You sense how deeply this ritual is woven into sleep. It signals safety. It tells the body that vigilance can ease at least a little. Afterward, blankets are pulled higher, lamps are turned lower, the fire is checked one last time. Occasionally prayer is interrupted. A child asks a question. Someone forgets a line and chuckles softly. These moments do not break the spell. They humanize it. The night remains gentle. There is comfort in repetition. Saying the same words each night creates a sense of continuity, even when days blur together in winter. Time stretches differently in cold seasons. Ritual anchors it, giving shape to evenings that might otherwise dissolve into exhaustion. You lie still, listening as the last words fade. The room feels quieter now, as if something has been settled. Breathing deepens around you. The shared focus dissipates, leaving calm in its wake. For some, this moment includes quiet reflection rather than spoken prayer. Thoughts drift to family far away, to places left behind, to people buried in frozen ground. Winter invites memory. Night gives it space. You feel a brief ache, then let it pass. The fire crackles softly, almost in response. The cabin seems to lean inward, holding everyone together. Outside, darkness remains unchanged. Inside, something has softened. You notice how easily sleep follows now. Muscles relax without effort. Thoughts lose their sharp edges. Even the cold feels less insistent, pushed slightly farther away by shared intention. Children slip into sleep quickly after this moment. Adults follow more slowly but with less resistance. The night no longer feels like something to endure. It feels like something that can be trusted, at least until morning. You drift aware that this ritual does not guarantee safety or warmth or health. It promises nothing tangible, and yet it changes the texture of the night. It replaces isolation with connection, uncertainty with shared resolve. As sleep deepens, words echo faintly in your mind, not as sentences but as tone. Calm, steady, reassuring. The kind of sound that tells you it is acceptable to rest. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by breath and quiet faith of many kinds you let go. The day is finished. The night is acknowledged. And with that simple act you're carried gently into sleep, held by routine, by hope, and by the quiet strength of people who have learned how to face winter together. Sleep brings more than rest. It brings meaning. And on the frontier, meaning often arrives tangled with dream signs and quiet beliefs carried into the dark. As your breathing slows, your thoughts begin to wander, and you sense that nighttime is not only for the body, it is for interpretation. Dreams here are taken seriously, not in a dramatic way, but with quiet attention. Someone wakes and mentions a strange image, a river running backward, a door that would not open, a fire that refused to light. These details are remembered in the morning, turned over while hands work and meals are prepared. Night visions are thought to carry information, warnings, or comfort. You lie still and feel images rise and fall in your own mind. Fragments of the day mix with imagination. Snow becomes endless. Walls stretch and breathe. Faces blur. You do not startle. This is familiar territory. Long winter nights stretch the boundary between waking and dreaming, making the transition softer, more porous. Certain beliefs hover quietly in the room. Some people avoid sleeping with their feet toward the door, uneasy with what that position might invite. Others prefer to keep a small object nearby, a charm, a coin, a bit of iron, not because they can explain why, but because it feels right. These habits are rarely discussed openly. They exist as personal safeguards. Children absorb these ideas easily. A child asks if the wind is angry tonight. An adult answers gently, reframing the sound as the land settling or trees talking to one another. Fear is redirected rather than dismissed. Night becomes less threatening when it's given a story. You notice how certain sounds are interpreted. An owl's call is listened to carefully. A branch striking the roof is remembered. Some nights feel heavier than others, and no one needs to say why. People sense it collectively, adjusting behavior without explanation. There is no agreement about which beliefs came from where. Some trace back to old countries. Others seem to have grown here, shaped by isolation and uncertainty. What matters is how they function. They give shape to fear, making it manageable. You shift slightly and feel the weight of the quilt press you back into stillness. Your dreams deepen. Images become less distinct, more emotional than visual. Comfort and unease mingle and settle. Someone nearby murmurs in their sleep, a name perhaps, or a place. No one reacts. These sounds are accepted as part of the night's landscape. Dreams spill into the room and dissolve without consequence. Morning will bring interpretation. A dream about fire might be mentioned cautiously. A dream about loss might be kept private. Winter encourages reflection, and sleep becomes one of its tools. For now, you let your own thoughts drift without meaning attached. You do not chase them. You let them come and go, trusting that whatever matters will surface later. The cold remains. The cabin holds. The night stretches on, layered not just with blankets and bodies, but with belief, imagination, and quiet attempts to understand a world that offers few guarantees. As sleep deepens further, thoughts soften. Dreams blur into sensation rather than story. You rest within that space, neither fully aware nor fully gone, carried by the shared understanding that night is not empty. It is filled with unseen currents gently moving you toward morning. Morning exists in your mind long before it exists in the world. You feel it as an idea rather than a reality, a distant promise that hovers somewhere beyond the dark. Even in sleep, part of you knows it is coming, and that knowledge shapes how you rest. Winter mornings do not arrive gently. They wait cold and demanding just beyond the edge of night. You stir slightly and feel the temperature shift again. The hours before dawn are the coldest. The fire has settled into its smallest glow. Breath hangs heavier in the air. Your body curls inward without instruction, conserving what warmth remains. You pull the quilt higher, not because you are awake, but because your body remembers this moment from nights before. The cabin is very still now. Breathing around you is slow and deep. No one moves unless they must. This is the fragile pause before the day begins, when rest is at its most precious. You sense that waking too early would be wasteful, draining energy needed for the work ahead. Outside, the world is locked in frost. You cannot see it, but you feel it pressing in, tightening the space around the cabin. Snow that fell earlier has hardened. Drifts have settled. Whatever paths existed yesterday are gone for now. Morning will not bring ease, it will bring effort. You think about what waits after sleep breaks. Water hauled from a source that may be frozen solid. Fires rebuilt from cold ash. Animals checked, fed, freed from ice. Clothing pulled on stiff with cold. The knowledge of this does not make sleep harder. It gives it purpose. Rest is preparation. Someone shifts nearby, perhaps sensing the same thing. A hand reaches out to pull a coat closer already, anticipating the moment it will be worn again. Another person coughs softly, then stills. No one speaks. There is nothing to say yet. Light begins to change, almost imperceptibly. Not brightness, just absence of absolute black. Your eyes register it even through closed lids. The night is thinning. The world outside is slowly revealing itself, though it offers no warmth yet. You remain still. Getting up too soon would expose skin to cold air, break the fragile pocket of warmth built through the night. Everyone knows this. Rising is delayed until it must happen. The fire will be first. Someone will reach for it, coaxing it back to life, feeding it carefully until flames return. Only then will movement spread through the room. Only then will the day be acknowledged. For now you rest in the final moments of night, suspended between what has been endured and what is coming. Your body holds on to warmth, your mind holds on to stillness. Winter mornings are earned, not granted. As the faintest hint of grey touches the window covering you, let your breathing deepen once more. There is nothing to do yet. Sleep still has value, and so you stay where you are, wrapped in layers, waiting for the cold world to ask you to rise. You do not sleep empty-handed, even when rest finally takes hold. As the night deepens and movement slows, you become aware of objects placed within easy reach. They sit quietly beside bedding, close enough to find in the dark without searching. On the frontier, the space beside where you sleep matters almost as much as the bed itself. Your fingers brush against something solid as you shift. Cold metal, familiar in shape. A knife rests there, not as a symbol of danger but of readiness. Tools are kept close because night has a way of demanding quick response. A loose hinge, a trapped animal, a fire that shifts unexpectedly. Reaching for what you need without standing fully can make all the difference. You notice how intentional the placement is. Nothing cluttered, nothing excessive. Each object has a purpose and a reason to be nearby. A lantern sits on the floor, wick trimmed earlier, ready to be lit with a single match. A pair of gloves is folded, not tossed. Boots are angled so feet can slide in easily, even half asleep. This arrangement does not feel tense, it feels practiced. Calm comes from knowing where things are. In the dark, familiarity replaces sight. Your hand learns the shape of objects by memory, not thought. There is a quiet sound as someone nearby adjusts a tool closer to themselves. The movement is minimal, almost unconscious. No one asks why. Everyone understands that night is unpredictable, especially in winter. Water is kept close too. A covered bucket or jug sits near the hearth not only to drink but in case embers escape. Fire is watched even in sleep. Respect for it does not fade with exhaustion. Children are taught this early. They learn where not to step, what not to touch, what to reach for if woken suddenly. These lessons are not framed as instruction. They are absorbed through repetition, through watching adults move with quiet certainty. You feel how this readiness shapes sleep. It does not make you anxious. It makes you confident enough to rest. Knowing you can respond allows your body to let go more fully. There is also a sense of order in this. Night strips away excess. Only what might be needed remains close. Everything else waits for daylight. This simplicity carries into your thoughts, clearing space for rest. You shift again and feel the handle of a tool press gently against the bedding. You adjust it slightly, ensuring it will not dig into you later. Even comfort is negotiated with practicality here. Outside, the wind rises briefly, then fades. Inside, nothing changes. The tools remain where they are silent and reassuring. You do not imagine danger at every sound. You simply remain prepared. There is something grounding about this. Modern nights often separate rest from readiness. Here they coexist. Sleep is not vulnerability. It is trust in your ability to respond. As hours pass, you forget about the objects beside you. Their presence fades into the background, doing their work by simply being there. Your muscles loosen. Your breathing deepens. If something does happen, you know you will wake. You know your hand will find what it needs. Until then, you rest supported by quiet order and thoughtful placement. The night continues, tools wait, you sleep. As the night stretches on, you become more aware of who holds it together. The warmth, the quiet order, the steady rhythm of care does not happen on its own. Much of it rests on women who remain lightly awake, even while resting their attention drifting but never fully letting go. You feel it in the way blankets are adjusted just before they slip too far. In how a child's breathing is checked without fully waking. In the instinctive reach for a shoulder when someone stirs with a troubled sigh. These movements are small, almost invisible, but they shape the entire night. Mothers often sleep last and wake first, not by decree, but by habit shaped over time. Their rest comes in fragments woven between listening and responding. Even when exhaustion pulls them under, part of their awareness remains close to the surface ready. You notice how quietly this work is done. No one announces it. No one thanks it aloud in the dark. It simply happens night after night. The cabin's steadiness depends on it more than anyone admits. There is a particular skill in managing warmth. Blankets must be shared without leaving anyone exposed. Children must be kept close but not overheated. Fire must be strong enough but not dangerous. These balances are felt rather than calculated, learned through long winters and shorter mistakes. You sense the calm authority in these movements. When a mother shifts, others unconsciously adjust around her. The rhythm of the room follows. Even adults respond to this quiet leadership, trusting it without thinking. Illness, fear, hunger and cold often announce themselves first at night. When they do, women respond without hesitation. A fevered forehead is cooled. A frightened child is soothed. A restless sleeper is guided back into stillness. These acts do not feel heroic. They feel necessary. There is little separation between night and responsibility. Sleep bends around care, not the other way around. You feel respect grow quietly, not through words, but through observation. In winter, this role becomes heavier. Cold multiplies every concern. A slipped blanket matters more. A missed sound carries greater risk. Yet there is no drama in how it is handled. Only patience. You notice moments when exhaustion nearly wins. A sigh. A pause before movement. Even then the response comes. Care resumes. The night continues. Children sense this presence even when asleep. They settle more deeply when warmth is adjusted. Breathing steadies when a hand rests nearby. Safety is communicated through touch long before words are understood. This work is rarely remembered in stories of the frontier. It leaves no visible marks, builds, no structures, claims no land. Yet without it, nights would unravel quickly. You see that now, lying quietly watching how the room holds together. As the hours drift toward morning, this vigilance softens but never disappears. Rest deepens where it can. Awareness remains where it must. You feel yourself carried by this unseen effort. The cabin feels held balanced, watched over. Winter remains harsh outside, but inside steadiness prevails. Wrapped in warmth, you did not arrange yourself. You drift further into sleep, knowing that even in rest, someone is listening for the small sounds that matter, keeping the night intact until daylight returns. Even as sleep settles in, you sense a different kind of awareness lingering in the room. It is quieter, heavier edged with caution. While others drift more deeply, some remain tuned to the outside world, listening past the walls and into the dark beyond. Men often take on this watchfulness, not by assignment but by habit shaped through long nights of uncertainty. You feel it in the way someone lies angled toward the door, not fully relaxed. In the way breathing stays just a little lighter, ears open even as eyes close. The frontier does not fully sleep. Animals move. Wind shifts, ice cracks. Occasionally footsteps carry across snow in ways that make your heart pause. Most sounds mean nothing, a few do not. Learning the difference becomes second nature. You notice how hands rest near tools, not gripping, just close. A rifle leans within reach. A heavy stick rests against the wall. These objects are not symbols of fear. They are extensions of responsibility. Protection is part of the night's fabric. Sleep comes in layers. Deep rest for a few, lighter rest for others. Someone turns slightly at every unfamiliar noise, then settles again when nothing follows. This pattern repeats without discussion. Everyone benefits from it, even those unaware of it happening. Outside, a sound carries briefly, a distant howl, thin and wavering. It does not grow closer. No one moves. The sound is catalogued and released. The night continues. You sense the calculation happening quietly. Weather animals, distance. Is the sound wrong or simply different? This mental work is done without waking others, preserving their rest unless necessary. Cold sharpens these instincts. Winter strips away distractions. Every sound stands out against the stillness. Listening becomes easier, more precise. You feel your own senses attune, even though you are not the one responsible. There is no tension in this watchfulness, only readiness. It does not exhaust. It settles into the body like a posture held gently, maintained without strain. You shift and feel the subtle repositioning of someone nearby adjusting without breaking rhythm. Awareness passes through the room like a quiet current, then fades again. Nothing happens. That is the goal. Nights that pass without incident are successes even if no one remarks on them. Protection is invisible when it works. As the hours stretch on, vigilance softens, cold steadies, wind calms. The world outside seems to pull back slightly, allowing deeper rest inside. You feel the weight of responsibility ease, not disappear, but relax enough to allow sleep to thicken. Breathing deepens, muscles loosen. If danger came, you know the response would be immediate, but it does not. And so rest continues layered and shared. Wrapped in warmth and quiet alertness, you drift further, trusting that someone is always listening even as you sleep. The night holds. The cabin remains still. Morning will come when it is ready. When the storm returns in full force, sleep changes its shape again. You feel it before you hear it, a pressure in the air, a tightening around the cabin. Wind rises and does not settle. Snow drives hard against the walls. The night becomes something to endure rather than move through gently. You lie still as the sounds build. Gusts strike the cabin with force, rattling boards and pressing snow into every seam. The structure answers with groans and creaks, familiar, but louder now. These noises do not mean collapse. They mean resistance. The cabin is working. Blizzards erase the outside world completely. Direction loses meaning. Distance collapses. Everything beyond the walls becomes indistinct, dangerous to imagine. You stop picturing it and focus inward instead. Sleep during a storm is shallow. You drift, then surface, then drift again. Each strong gust pulls you back toward awareness. Your body stays curled tight, conserving warmth. Blankets are pulled higher. Clothing is tucked closer. Movement inside the cabin is minimal. No one wants to break the fragile warmth that has been built. Fire is tended carefully, but not often. Opening the door now would invite chaos. Any task that can wait does. Snow piles against the walls, adding weight, but also insulation. The sound changes as drifts build, dulling the impact of wind. The storm reshapes itself hour by hour, and you listen without trying to predict it. You feel time stretch. Minutes blur. Sleep becomes a series of pauses rather than a continuous state. Your thoughts slow, then scatter, then slow again. Dreams fragment, interrupted by sound and sensation. Fear exists, but it is muted by familiarity. This is not the first storm. It will not be the last. The cabin has endured before. People inside it know what to do and what not to do. That knowledge steadies the night. Children are held closer. Adults remain stiller. Breathing stays measured. Everyone waits together. At some point the storm reaches its peak. Wind roars steadily. Snow hammers the roof. The noise becomes constant, almost numbing. You stop reacting to individual sounds and let them merge into one continuous presence. Then slowly, without announcement, the storm begins to loosen its grip. Gusts soften. The pounding eases. Silence does not return all at once, but it creeps back in layers. You sink deeper into rest as the world outside calms. Muscles unclench. Breathing deepens. The worst has passed. Sleep finally settles, heavier now earned through endurance rather than ease. Wrapped in layers surrounded by quiet resilience, you drift, knowing that when morning comes it will reveal a changed landscape shaped by the night you have just survived. When the storm quiets and the night stretches on, another feeling settles in. It's not cold, not fear, not even exhaustion. It is distance. The awareness that the world beyond this cabin feels impossibly far away, as if it has slipped just out of reach. You lie awake for a while, not because something is wrong, but because the silence after a storm feels too large. Snow has smothered every familiar sound. No wind, no animals, no creaking trees, just stillness, thick and complete. It presses inward, making the cabin feel like the only place that exists. Isolation sharpens at night. During the day, work distracts you. Hands stay busy. The body stays warm through motion. But in the dark, with nothing to do but rest, the mind wanders. You think about neighbours you have not seen in weeks. You wonder how far away the nearest light might be right now, buried under the same snow. The cabin feels smaller in this quiet. Walls that protected you earlier now feel closer. You become aware of every breath, every shift of weight. Even shared warmth cannot fully push away the sense that you are alone in a vast frozen landscape. Someone sighs nearby, a sound so soft it barely registers. Is enough to remind you that you're not truly alone. You listen for breathing, counting the rise and fall around you. The room is full of life, even if the outside world feels empty. Winter nights stretch time in strange ways. Hours feel longer, thoughts loop more easily, memories surface without warning. Faces from other seasons drift through your mind, then fade. You do not chase them. You let them come and go, knowing they are part of the night. There is comfort in routine here. The same blankets, the same fire, the same sounds. Familiarity becomes a lifeline. Even isolation feels less sharp when it follows a known pattern. You turn slightly, pressing closer to warmth. The physical presence of others grounds you, pulling your attention back into the room. Touch becomes reassurance. Weight becomes proof. The mind eventually tires of wandering. Thoughts slow. The silence that felt overwhelming earlier begins to feel neutral, then gentle. Snow outside holds everything, still giving you permission to stop reaching outward. You rest more deeply now, no longer resisting the quiet. Isolation remains, but it softens, becoming part of the landscape rather than something to fight. Wrapped in shared warmth, you drift, letting the night carry you forward, even when the world feels very far away. Somewhere in the long middle of the night, something unexpected happens. It is subtle enough that you almost miss it. A softening, a release. The cold is still there, the work still waiting. The risks unchanged, yet a calm settles over you that feels earned rather than borrowed. You notice it first in your breathing. It slows without effort. The tightness you carried earlier eases its grip. Your shoulders sink deeper into the bedding. The body which has spent hours negotiating with cold and sound and responsibility finally accepts that for this moment it can rest. The cabin feels different now, not warmer exactly, but steadier. The fire holds, the walls hold, the wind stays distant. Snow outside reflects faint light back into the darkness, lending the night a quiet glow that seeps through cracks and edges. You feel wrapped not just by blankets, but by stillness. Someone nearby shifts and settles again, a small movement that does not ripple through the room the way it once might have. Everyone seems heavier now, anchored by sleep. Even those who kept a lighter watch earlier have loosened their awareness, drifting inward. There is peace in this moment that surprises you. It is not joy, not relief, but something quieter. Acceptance, perhaps. The knowledge that this night, like others before it, is being endured successfully. That alone is enough. You let your thoughts wander without direction. They do not latch onto worry. They move slowly like clouds crossing a winter sky. Images appear and dissolve. The mind, usually busy measuring and planning, finally quiets. The smells of the cabin blend into something familiar and comforting. Smoke, wool, wood, human warmth. These scents no longer register as separate. They become the smell of safety. Your body recognizes it and responds, sinking deeper into rest. You realize that these moments are what people remember later, even if they do not describe them directly. Not the cold itself, but the calm found within it. Not the danger, but the stillness between dangers. These are the memories that linger. A faint sound reaches you, perhaps snow sliding from the roof, perhaps something shifting inside the walls. You register it, then let it go. No alarm follows. The night remains gentle. You feel gratitude, unspoken and unexamined. Gratitude for shelter, for shared warmth, for the simple fact of being inside while winter holds sway outside. It does not feel dramatic. It feels grounding. Sleep deepens, now no longer light or vigilant, but full and restorative. Muscles release tension they have carried for days. Your jaw unclenches. Your hands loosen. Even your dreams soften, losing sharp edges. Time becomes difficult to measure. You're aware of drifting, of returning, of drifting again. Each return feels less necessary. The night does not demand your attention right now. It allows you this peace. This calm does not erase hardship. It exists alongside it. Tomorrow will still be cold. Work will still be heavy. Supplies will still need managing. Yet this moment stands on its own, a quiet reward for endurance. You shift slightly and feel the warmth adjust with you as if the bedding itself is responsive. Nothing disturbs the balance. The cabin breathes slowly around you. Outside, winter continues its work. Inside, something gentler unfolds. The world narrows to the size of the room, then to the size of your breath, then to nothing at all. You drift fully now, carried by a stillness that feels rare and precious. In this moment, the frontier does not feel hostile or harsh. It feels quiet, held, almost kind. Sleep takes you without resistance, wrapped in the knowledge that even in the hardest seasons, there are moments when everything aligns just enough to let you rest. The calm does not last forever, but when it breaks, it does so gently. A new presence enters the night, not unexpected, just rare enough to feel different. Voices low and familiar drift toward the cabin before the door ever opens. You sense it before you hear words, the subtle shift that comes when others step into your small circle of warmth. Winter visits are never casual. They are planned around weather, daylight, and necessity. When neighbours arrive after dark, it means something mattered enough to risk the cold. The door opens briefly, letting in a rush of icy air, sharp and startling. Snow clings to coats and boots. Breath clouds thickly in the lamplight. Movement follows quickly. The door is shut, the latch checked. Cold is sealed back out. Coats are shaken gently near the entrance. Gloves are tucked away. Someone laughs softly, the sound carrying warmth of its own. The cabin adjusts, making room. You feel the change immediately. More bodies mean more heat, more breath, more sound. The room grows fuller, not crowded, just alive in a different way. Blankets are shifted. Seating is rearranged. No one complains. These visits are welcomed even when space is tight. The visitors bring the outside world with them. News travels this way, carried on boots and breath. A drift blocking the creek path, a roof needing repair, a calf born early. These updates are exchanged quietly, not because they are secret, but because night encourages softer voices. Someone pours a small measure of something warm. Hands wrap around cups. Steam rises briefly, then disappears. The drink is shared sparingly, more symbol than indulgence. It settles nerves as much as bodies. Children wake just enough to register the change, then settle again, soothed by the sound of voices. Familiar adults reassure them without words. Nighttime visitors do not disrupt sleep. They become part of it. Stories emerge, not long ones, just fragments. A memory from another winter. A close call on the trail. A small success worth noting. These moments knit people together, reinforcing bonds that matter most when conditions turn hard. You listen without needing to speak. The presence of others eases the lingering isolation left by the storm. The world feels slightly larger again, extending beyond these walls in a manageable way. Eventually the visitors prepare to leave. The decision is made carefully, weather is checked, time is measured, coats are pulled on reluctantly, goodbyes are brief but sincere. The door opens once more, cold rushes in then retreats as it closes again. Silence returns, but it feels different now. Less heavy, more companionable. You settle back into rest, carrying the warmth of shared presence with you. These visits do not happen often, but when they do, they leave a mark. They remind you that even in winter, even at night, community finds a way to show up. Sleep comes easily after that, enriched by voices and laughter that echo softly as you drift, holding you steady until the night moves on. By now you have stopped thinking of sleep as a fixed thing. It bends with the seasons stretching and compressing as winter demands. Night and day lose their sharp edges, especially when cold limits how much can be done outside. Rest becomes something you enter and leave more than once guided, less by clocks and more by light, weather and energy. You notice how winter encourages longer hours in bed, even if much of that time is spent half awake. Darkness arrives early and lingers late. Lamps are used sparingly. The body responds by slowing down, conserving effort. You lie down earlier than you would in warmer months, not because you are tired yet, but because there is nowhere else to be. Sleep comes in segments. A long stretch early in the night. A waking to tend the fire or check a sound. Another stretch closer to dawn. These rhythms feel natural now. Your body no longer resists them. It adapts, learning how to rest deeply in short spans. During the day, naps become part of life. A pause after a heavy meal, a brief rest while snow falls too thick to work in. These moments are not labelled as sleep, but they serve the same purpose. Winter allows them, even encourages them. You feel how energy is managed carefully. Effort is saved where it can be. Movements are slower. Tasks are grouped together to avoid repeated exposure to cold. Rest is taken whenever possible without guilt or explanation. Children follow this rhythm easily. They sleep longer at night nap without resistance during the day. Adults adjust more deliberately, learning to listen to their limits. Pushing through fatigue in winter carries consequences, and everyone knows it. The line between night and day softens. You might wake and not know immediately whether it is morning or midnight. Light is dim either way. The fire must be built regardless. Time becomes measured by needs rather than hours. You lie back and feel how this seasonal rhythm has settled into you. Your body responds to darkness with ease now. Sleep comes faster. Waking feels less abrupt. Winter has trained you in patience. Outside, the world remains quiet and slow. Inside, rest and work alternate gently like breathing. You no longer fight it. You move with it. As the night continues, you drift again, knowing that this pattern will hold until the light returns for longer each day. For now, winter sets the pace, and you rest when it tells you to, letting sleep arrive and leave as it needs to. The night feels different now, thinner somehow, as if winter itself is loosening its grip just a little. You sense it not through warmth, but through anticipation. Something is shifting slowly and quietly long before it becomes obvious in daylight. You lie still and notice how your body rests more easily than it did earlier in the season. Cold still presses in, but it no longer feels endless. Sleep arrives with less negotiation. Muscles release faster. Breathing settles sooner. The night still demands respect, but it no longer dominates every thought. There is a subtle change in sound. Snow no longer falls with the same urgency. Wind pauses more often between gusts. Silence stretches differently, not as heavy, not as absolute. You register these changes without fully waking your body responding before your mind does. The fire lasts longer now, holding its heat with less effort. Fewer adjustments are needed. The coals glow steadily as if cooperating rather than resisting. You feel warmth linger closer to morning than it used to, easing the sharp edge that once defined pre-dawn hours. People move less during the night. Fewer checks, fewer interruptions. The room feels more settled, more confident. Winter has taught its lessons, and now it eases slightly, allowing longer stretches of uninterrupted rest. You sense this shift in your dreams as well. They feel lighter, less fragmented. Images move more smoothly, less interrupted by cold or sound. Even sleep seems to recognize that the worst has passed. Outside snow still covers everything, but it feels older now, compacted and familiar rather than new and threatening. The land has adapted. So have you. You remain wrapped in layers, still cautious, but the constant edge of vigilance softens. The night allows itself to be quieter, more forgiving. You accept this without celebration. On the frontier, changes like this are noticed, not announced. As you drift, you understand that winter does not end suddenly. It recedes in increments, one easier night at a time. Rest improves before conditions do. The body senses safety before the world confirms it. Sleep deepens steadier now. The cabin holds warmth longer. Morning feels less distant. You rest within this subtle transition, knowing that while cold remains, its hold is weakening. The night carries you gently forward, no longer testing at every moment. Wrapped in quiet endurance and cautious relief, you drift aware that something has shifted, and that rest at last is becoming just a little easier to find. You feel it before you can explain it. The night no longer feels endless. Cold still lives in the air, but it has lost some of its authority. You lie there aware that winter, which once dominated every thought, is beginning to loosen its grip in small, almost polite ways. Sleep comes more naturally now. You do not brace yourself before drifting off. Your body no longer curls as tightly, no longer guards every exposed inch. Breath moves more freely through your chest. The room feels familiar rather than hostile. There is a faint difference in the dark. Not light exactly, but a suggestion of it. The window covering holds a softer grey instead of solid black. Morning still waits, but it no longer feels impossibly far away. The fire behaves differently too. It holds longer without attention. Cold stay warm deep into the night. Someone stirs once out of habit, then settles again, realizing it is not yet necessary. Rest stretches out unbroken. You notice how people sleep heavier now. Movements are fewer. Sounds carry less urgency. The room feels confident in itself, as if it knows it can make it through without constant correction. Outside, the land rests under layers of old snow. It no longer shifts or slides or groans as much. Everything feels set stable. Winter has spent its fiercest energy already. Your dreams reflect this change. They are slower, calmer. Images pass without jolt or interruption. You do not wake startled. You drift from thought to thought, cushioned by deeper rest. There is still caution here. Blankets remain close. Clothing stays on. No one forgets what cold can do. But fear has thinned. Vigilance has softened into awareness. You realize how much effort it took to get here. Nights of adjustment, bodies learning, habits forming. None of it wasted. All of it carried forward into this quieter phase. The cabin feels almost gentle now. Walls still creak, but without tension. Wind still passes, but it no longer demands attention. You trust the structure. You trust the night. As sleep deepens again, you understand that winter does not end with celebration. It ends with relief so subtle, it almost goes unnoticed. One night feels easier than the last. Then another still. You rest in that easing, aware that the worst is behind you even if snow remains. The night holds without pressure. The cold waits without threat. Wrapped in familiar layers, surrounded by steady breath, you drift peacefully, knowing that winter's hold is weakening, and that rest now comes not from endurance alone, but from quiet confidence built night after night. You lie still, aware that this night feels like a threshold. Not an ending, not quite a beginning, but a point where something has been carried through and can now be set down at least a little. Winter is still present, still cold, still capable of surprise, yet it no longer defines every moment of rest. Sleep feels fuller now. It reaches deeper without being interrupted so often by cold, by sound, by the need to check and adjust. Your body trusts the night in a way it could not before. Muscles release sooner, breath settles without effort. The cabin feels steady, familiar, almost companionable. You notice how routines have simplified. Fewer layers need constant rearranging. The fire behaves predictably. Blankets stay where they are placed. Even the wind seems less interested in testing the walls. Everything works together with less resistance. Around you, others sleep deeply. Their breathing is slow and even. The room feels heavier with rest, as if it's finally accumulated enough quiet to hold everyone without strain. The long winter nights have taught the body how to surrender without fear. You think about what these nights leave behind, not just memory, but habit. The way you curl instinctively, the way you listen without waking, the way you value warmth, closeness, and stillness. These lessons will linger long after the cold retreats. Outside, the land remains pale and frozen, but it no longer feels hostile. It feels patient, waiting, just as you are. You allow yourself to drift again, not because you must conserve energy, but because sleep has become welcome rather than strategic. The night no longer demands negotiation. It offers rest freely now. You feel carried forward, not just into morning, but beyond this season. The experience of winter nights settles into you, becoming part of how you understand rest, endurance, and quiet strength. The cabin holds, the night holds, and so do you. The hours pass gently now. The darkness thins without urgency. You do not rush toward morning. You let it approach at its own pace. Wrapped in warmth, surrounded by steady breath, you remain still, allowing the final images of winter nights to soften and fade. The fire breathes low and calm. The walls no longer creak with complaint. Snow outside rests without movement. Everything feels suspended in a calm that asks nothing of you. You release the last tension you did not realize you were holding. Your jaw loosens. Your hands rest open. Thoughts slow until they no longer form sentences, only feeling. This is the gift these nights offer at last. Not triumph, not relief alone, but peace earned through patience. You sink gently into sleep, knowing that even the hardest seasons pass and that rest, when it finally comes, is deep and kind.